On today's show, Tony DiLorenzo, marriage and relationship expert, co-host of one of the top marriage podcasts, One Extraordinary Marriage, and author of the international best-selling book, The 6 Pillars of Intimacy. We'll be talking about how your relationship at home can directly impact performance and success in a law practice, where high-performing attorneys start to drift in their marriages, and how deeper connection, stronger communication, and more intimacy can become a force multiplier for greater business focus, energy, and achieving long-term professional success.
I will say there is such a correlation between the success we have in business with the success we have in our home. And our home life can really impact the business side of things, right? It can be a multiplier when things are going great at home. I think we are able to not have, as you said, the mental load draining us.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hello, welcome back to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I am Jason Marsh, and joining me today is Tony DiLorenzo. Hey, Tony, great to see you.
Hey, it's great to see you too, Jason.
So this is going to be a little bit different of a show than what I normally do. Is normally we're talking about the business side, practicing law, operations, marketing, technology, all of that. But today we're going to be talking about something that sits underneath all of that, but I think is also very critical, and that's your relationship at home with your spouse. And I think it's not something most people think about in this way, because for me, your relationship at home is one of your biggest business assets, and how it can be a real multiplier to you as a business owner, or potentially a drag on your ability to operate at your best. Because in my view, it's either amplifying your focus, energy, confidence, your ability to make decisions, or it might be quietly eroding a lot of that. So before we get too deep into all this, I want to introduce you. Again, I'm here with Tony DiLorenzo. He's the co-author with his wife, Elisa, right? Is that the pronunciation? Got it.
That is correct. Elisa.
So, yep, he does all his work with his wife, Elisa. So they have a new book, The 6 Pillars of Intimacy, and they are also a co-host of one of the top marriage podcasts. If you don't already know it, it's called One Extraordinary Marriage Podcast, over 800 episodes, which that's amazing, all focused on helping couples build stronger relationships. And so for well over a decade, Tony and his wife, Elisa, have been working with couples to build stronger, more connected relationships. And they have some practical frameworks on how to do that within the core areas that actually matter. So Tony is actually an entrepreneur and a business owner as well, like the rest of us, but he spent a lot of time understanding what makes relationships work and where they tend to break down. Now, Tony, you've talked about how an extraordinary marriage, it doesn't just happen. And I think we all know this, but it takes intentionality, communication, and the biggest thing, consistent investment in that. And so I think that's especially relevant for lawyers or any entrepreneur, because the demands of running a business can sometimes quietly just consume a lot of us if we let it, between the long hours, the stress, financial pressure, hard decisions, and I relate the constant mental load that can all just start showing up at home. But at the same time, the opposite can be true. When you have an amazing relationship and at home is strong, it can give you more stability and confidence, energy, and clarity in your business. So let's talk about this, Tony. How connected is the relationship at home to how someone performs as a business owner? And then where do you typically see that relationship either multiplying someone's success or starting to hold them back?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Jason. And yes, I have been an entrepreneur now for 22 years, 23 years at this point. So I get it. I've run smaller businesses. Some I have done on my own. One Extraordinary Marriage I do with my beautiful wife, Elisa, as you shared. And I will say there is such a correlation between the success we have in business with the success we have in our home. And I think our home life can really impact the business side of things, right? It can be a multiplier when things are going great at home. I think we are able to not have, as you said, the mental load draining us. Our minds are constantly going back to what did I say to my spouse or what happened at home, and we have at work, we tend to become distracted by that. So that's where it can start to drag us down and make us feel like, oh, what did I do wrong? And I've been there. Like, I just want to share this real quick. I've been married 29 years as of this recording. I'm going to celebrate my 30th anniversary later this year to my beautiful wife. We almost got divorced twice in our marriage. So I know what it's like to be at a point where I spent so much time in the business and in even other activities and not creating that extraordinary marriage and that bond between Elisa and I, that it took up so much energy. On the other side of it, when we are working on our marriage, and I'm not saying it's perfect because we're not perfect, either Elisa or I are perfect. And yet when we're being intentional, as you said, and taking action to create that extraordinary marriage, it really does help your business life and how you are viewing what you're doing at business.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit, and I'll just talk a little bit more about this idea of it being a multiplier, because again, I don't think this is the type of thing that people think of from a business perspective. And in your book, you shared a story about your first 11 years of marriage where everything looked fine externally, but you guys were actually drifting apart internally, right? Because you're dealing with day-to-day life, right? Which we know can be an absolute grind, right? Kids, money, logistics of getting stuff from here to there. And for you and Elisa, you lost that real connection. So can you talk about the idea that a relationship can look functional, but meanwhile in the background, it's quietly draining your energy, your focus, and your performance at work?
Yeah, I think that's a societal issue. And Elisa and I had the opportunity recently to travel and speak on the 6 Pillars of Intimacy in Zimbabwe and Zambia as well. We do our 6 Pillars at Sea marriage getaway cruise where we're on the islands, traveling with people from all over the US, Canada. And that's a societal issue overall, I see. We all want to present ourselves better than what we really are. And so we need to have places where we can feel, and I'm going to use the word safe. I don't like it as much, but a place where we can truly be open, honest, and transparent with ourselves, number one, but also with our spouse, husband or wife. Because if we don't, all that stuff does build up and eventually it's going to blow up. And we've seen it happen many a times. We have been there ourselves. At 11 years, we had a 5 and a 2-year-old. So we were under the grind. I mean, it was tough. And at that point in time, in particular, hold on, let me think where we are right now. We're in 26. 16. Yeah. At that point in time too, I was just trying to do the numbers, Jason. We're right in that cusp of the Great Recession. So it was right before that, but in that time frame, things were looking good and then things began to crash. And I'm glad that Elisa and I paid attention to ourselves because I think the crash in the economy would have tanked our marriage as well.
Yeah, I'll bet. And I imagine it was a real stress test for a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs. So where do you see a strong relationship actually making someone better at what they're trying to do or what they're trying to achieve professionally?
It's a great question. And I'm just trying to think when I think about my own life, what are the things that I have done to allow that to happen? And I think some of it is space. It's allowing time in my day where not every single minute is packed with something at work. Or even taking work from as soon as I get up and running through my day, like even in that morning time frame where I'm at home, but I'm not really at home, to then running all the way through work and then coming back home and then being home, but not really at home again. And I remember those days where that really impacted how Elisa and I were connecting and even myself with the children. And it impacted myself too. I was just getting burned out from every which place and I just was starting to shut down.
And in terms of like you've seen your ups and downs, right, professionally as an entrepreneur, and were there times where you really had to lean on Elisa at home and that your relationship was strong, like you said, following the Great Recession? And how that actually helped you excel as opposed to, and those of us who have had tough relationships where you're going to work and you're carrying all that with you, you're not focused, you're thinking about the conversation you had before you, all of that. But the flip side of that, when you have the love and the support and encouragement, because I think as entrepreneurs, we all need that because it can be a difficult road. It can be lonely if you're not spending a lot of time with other entrepreneurs. And so sometimes you're just carrying all this stuff alone. But were there times where you could see that, man, thank goodness, like my relationship at home was really strong because that was really adding something to what I was able to do professionally?
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing better to walk home when you've been beat down by the world to your wife sitting there at the door going, welcome home. I'm so happy you're here. Like that in itself can change how you just perceive yourself after being in the world, just getting, and even on those good days, it's amazing to come home. But I remember in some of those tough times where just her willingness to just be like, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so happy that you went out there and just did what you had to do to make it work for our family in that time frame. And when we were going through the Great Recession, she was a stay-at-home mom doing some direct sales stuff. I had an auto reconditioning business. And so I was facing a lot of challenges because after the real estate industry, the second hardest hit industry was the car manufacturing, auto industry. And so my business got decimated. And I wasn't willing to pivot. I was hard-headed. I was like, we are going to make it out of this. But you know what? Even to this day, when I come home, even if we're doing stuff here at One Extraordinary Marriage and maybe a meeting doesn't go as planned or something didn't go the way we expected it, or we got an email, typically it's more like now it's emails or DMs or somebody's leaving you those. And you're just like dejected to just come home. And even for her to tell her even like, I love you. Keep doing what you're doing. I know we're making an impact in people's lives. It's just sometimes it's just not happening right today and right now, but we're going to keep we're going to keep moving forward. And this is the way we're going to respond. And just even having that feedback from her can be super helpful in these days.
That is amazing when you're going through a tough time or doing something that you haven't done and that's challenging. I mean, just for me, like my wife, Katie, she's amazing. And she'll say, listen, I know this is tough, but I'm really proud of you for trying, or something along those lines. And it's just reinforcing versus you can obviously have very opposite things going on at home where somebody's criticizing you or making you question what you're actually doing. And so I'm very fortunate in that way. But I want to talk about the idea of how home shows up at work. And so let's talk about the actual mechanism here, right? Because this isn't just some vague idea that being happy at home is good for you when you work. But when things at home are off, that can start showing up in your focus or your energy, your stress, your decision, all that stuff. So how does the relationship at home now affect how you would show up at work?
Well, it shows up, a hundredfold. If you feel dejected and rejected at home, how do you feel at work? How do you feel with taking a potential client call? How do you feel when you're working with those that you have on retainer? And I think a lot of it is the mental gymnastics we have going on in our head when things are not clear or have been flushed out with our spouse at home. And I think the biggest contributor to this is we don't know how to accurately communicate. And I'm going to say, like, we're going to talk about the 6 pillars. Is the workhorse. It's called emotional intimacy pillar. But if we're unable to communicate what's happening with ourselves or what's happening at work, I think that's where a lot of this gets taken into our work. If we're unable to share what's happening with ourselves at home, it's being that open, honest, and transparent with ourselves and with our spouse. And when I begin to learn that and we begin to teach that and share it with people, like this is a skill just like anything else. Like you're an attorney, you learned a skill and you practice your skill and your trade. It's the same thing with communication. If we can do that, it really begins to allow us to feel like we can conquer the world at work.
Yeah. And what a feeling that is, right? And you mentioned communication. I think we all know that inherently. The problem is the execution, right? We just don't do it. And I think this is what we're trying to talk about today is what are some of the frameworks? What are some of the ways to think about this? But you mentioned this a minute ago, because I do want to ask a little, when you get home and you have your spouse, it's, oh, I'm so happy you're here. Because I think stress recovery, let's say, again, our work can be stress. How does that affect when you don't have things going right at home? How does that affect your stress recovery in those scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, do you recover? I think is a bigger question, Jason, right? I mean, are you able to actually be in a place where you can feel like, all right, I can sit here and feel again, safe in the terms of nobody's going to shoot you. Bear's not chasing you down. especially in today's day and age. But we as humans, our cortisol levels are still racing. And if we're unable to ever get those down, and I'm not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, I do my research as best as I can, learning about this myself as a 52-year-old man and wanting to be healthy well into my 80s and 90s. But if we're not addressing that, it's gonna really just impact us in many different ways. Again, it could be the communication, health-wise, just our own health. Like, and what does that look like even from a sexual standpoint, being able to really be close and connected with our spouse that nobody else gets to, but we do. And I think that has a huge impact on what ends up happening in the home, the mental gymnastics we're doing that then goes back into work, that then leaves us depleted at work, not doing our best. Doesn't allow us to grow our business anymore because we are so stressed out at home and at work.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you have probably a lot of this. You mentioned, do you recover? And the reality is you probably don't. So it's hammering your energy day after day after day, and it's just bringing you down, compounding. And so all this unresolved conflict you may have at home is now carrying over into the business and then back and then forth. So
and we have to recover, Jason. We have to recover. And I can share it like this. I used to be an ultra distance road cyclist. And when I say an ultra distance road cyclist, for me, my top event was a double century. So 200 miles in a day. And I would do those anywhere from, and I think I did 11, 12 of them. And I would do them as fast as 10 and a half hours. And my longest one took me 18 hours. What I learned was, and I started road cycling when I was 14. So I loved it. And I just stopped it once we moved here to Florida. I didn't want to get hit by some of the older people here. That's a whole nother story. But what I learned, because I love cycling so much, I would just ride day after day after day after day. And I would do other things. I would lift, I would do that. And I never allowed myself to recover. And so when game day came, when the 200-mile ride came, I was so depleted, that usually ended up being one of my worst rides. Now that happened the first few times. And then I realized, I'm like, whoa. I can't keep feeling like that. I know I'm better than this. And so what I have to do is I had to put in those recovery days in my calendar, in my week, in my month, to just go, you are doing nothing. You're going to just roll your quads. You're going to just roll your calves. You're not going to actually physically engage in something. And I think it's the same thing in our marriage and in our work life. If we never just take recovery time, we just get so depleted that we just can't enjoy our lives anymore. So just wanted to share that. I
like that. That answer is actually a good segue into where I want to go next in terms of where high performers start to drift, right? Because a lot of lawyers, entrepreneurs, like you cycling, are used to pushing really hard professionally in this case. And then that can create problems at home over time, right? And you've talked about roommate syndrome, right? I think this is really interesting, especially relevant for higher performers, because the thing about it is, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you're very intentional in your work, in your business, and then you assume the marriage will somehow take care of itself, right? So where do you see high performers like yourself drift in their relationships? What are some of these warning signs that the marriage maybe has shifted from connection to just logistics? What do we got to get done today? No connection beyond that.
I think we have, when there is communication happening, we either go to the silent treatment or we're volcanoes. And either one of us are. Like anytime we try to talk, there is this constant, like, I'm just shutting down and I'm leaving. And that could be to your bedroom. That could be for a drive. That could be your spouse doing that as well. It could be we're having these conversations, and because of stress of life and work and everything else, the only thing you can do is just scream. And I think that's one place where we see this happening a lot. And again, do you have to live there forever? No. Have I been there, and Elisa and I have been there? Yeah, we have. We've been married 29 years.
How do you find that middle ground between just shutting down completely or exploding?
I don't know if you find the middle ground. I think each of us, because of our upbringing, we see and we're modeled ways to communicate. So in our relationship, per se, Elisa always saw her dad. If he got angry, mom shut down. So she learned that if dad got angry, you just shut down. And so in our relationship, when we got married, and I come from an Italian family. So in an Italian family, you're screaming at each other all the time. Like that's just normal life. And you just get excited and you talk a little louder. And to Elisa, that meant, well, you're screaming at me, I'm shutting down. And so she would shut down and then I would get a little more angry. And I have a propensity during stressful times that I will get more volcano. She becomes more of an iceberg or in that silent treatment. Can that be broken? Absolutely. I do believe that many of us have not dealt with issues of our past. And so we just take that into our marriage thinking that, well, that's the way it was modeled to me. So that's the way it's going to work here, where all you need really is a marriage coach to come alongside you to give you some tools in your marriage toolbox to go, I get it. When we're in this situation, we just need to change a little bit of this dynamic so we don't go into volcano or iceberg.
Yeah. So I want to get into the 6 pillars, your framework.
Yeah.
Because I think that, but before we do that, I just wanted to ask, like, in terms of like whether it's becoming a volcano or shutting down, I think oftentimes there's a lot of unspoken expectations.
Oh, absolutely.
And then those things factor into that distance that gets created because you're not talking about them. Again, this is all about communication. And so what role do those unspoken expectations play in creating all that distance?
Man, I mean, unspoken expectations are the detriment to our marriages, right? We got married. I thought we were going to gallivant all around the world because we had this amazing honeymoon, and that's the way life was always going to be. I thought when I would walk through the front door, husband or wife, I don't care what direction. I thought every time that I would walk through the door, you would be right there for me. I thought every time I sent you a text message, you'd respond no matter what was going on in your life. Doesn't matter if you're in court or not. I have a text message I'm sending you. And so you're supposed to respond back. And you did it in 5 minutes instead of the 1 minute. So that's an unmet expectation. We had expectations that we would be making love 3-4 times a week. Where has that gone? I had an expectation that you were going to do all the dishes. Like, I work. You're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad. I thought you would clean up all this stuff. Unmet expectations, if we do not address them, again, if you haven't talked about them, please do. Like, some of this stuff is just sitting in your heads and you're so scared to begin to talk about them because you're fearful of what may happen. And I would suggest that if you begin to talk about them and share them with one another, not all at one time because that could be a bit much, but what does that do to free you up to be the best version of yourself at home and at work? And it's something that Elisa and I have done day after day, year after year. So that way we are not getting bottled up. We're not these massive stress balls, but it does take time and it does take work, and it doesn't just happen because you think it should happen. Like, just like your business, you work at it every day. Marriage, if you just let it go to whatever it's going to go, the lowest common denominator is basically what's going to happen. Like, you're not going to have that extraordinary marriage because you haven't put the effort into it.
Right. Yeah. It can't be some set it and forget it. It's all going to take care of itself.
I tried that. It didn't work for me.
Yeah. I imagine a lot of people have gone through that. And again, like, I think unmet expectation is just is a major source of anger, frustration, resentment across all aspects of life. And so I think that's why getting those expectations out on the table is really the way. So let's talk about the 6 pillars, right? One of the things I like about your 6 pillars framework is it gives people a way to diagnose where the cracks are, also where to see where maybe they're strong as well. And so in your story, you all had the 60-day sex challenge. And it started as one thing, but then it revealed issues across a whole bunch of other parts of the marriage. And we'll go through each of the pillars, but can you talk about that a little bit?
The 60-day sex challenge?
Yeah. What was that? And what did it reveal that was unexpected?
Yeah. So Elisa and I were about to lead a small group study at our church. It's going to be 8 weeks long. It's going to be on the Song of Solomon. And we happened to be at home because I believe that we need to be talking about sexual intimacy. And this was, I don't know how many, 18 years ago. No. Yeah, 18 years ago now. And at that point in time in our marriage, 11 years in, 5 and a 2-year-old, we felt like we had 3 options, Jason. 1, we get a divorce. We're at this point in life where it's just like, forget it. We'll just get divorced. We'll co-parent the best we can and we'll move on, even though co-parenting wasn't even a word back then. 2, we wait for our youngest to turn 18, get a divorce then. That is happening now more than ever. Gray divorce is what that is called. Our youngest is now 20. Thank God we are still married and happily married and love one another more than ever. Or 3, we get radical. And so we're about to lead this small group study, 8 weeks long. We happen to be watching a TV segment, news segment. Our friends, their children were doing like beach tennis down in San Diego where we had lived at the time. But the segment after is what piqued our interest. There are 2 couples. The first, the wife gave her husband 365 days of sex for the year, for his 40th birthday.
Yeah, I read this. What a gift.
They never say how many though. The second one gives 100, they did 101 days straight. I'm the visionary. I'm like optimistic. I'm like glasses 7/8 full. I look at Elise and I'm like, hey, we're about to lead this 8-week study. What if we do a 60-day sex challenge? She goes, no, not doing it. I'm like, okay.
And hold on, I want to pause for a minute, right? Because again, just to go back, you're in that point of life where the kids are still young. You're grinding through life, just trying to get everything done. This is the hardest time, I think, for so many couples because the focus shifts to the kids, right? Hard to reflect back on yourself.
Kids,
so
everything.
Yeah. And so then the idea of, we're just going to start having sex every night. Like, where are we going to find time for that? Right. So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. And so that's where, and I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because that's where Lisa was. She's like, why would I do this? We're barely even having sex now. And the next day, though, she had a God moment where it was just like, yes, I'm going to do this. And she told me, and I was like, oh my goodness, what did I just get myself into now?
Yeah, you're thinking the same, right? Like, now I got to have sex every night. Like, sounds great. But sometimes
like high five and they're like, yeah, that's great. Yeah. And no. When you think about it and you're like, okay, 60 days, this is going to be a lot. But we said, we're going to do this. We came up with our own guidelines for our challenge. We ended up completing 40 out of 60 days. But the big thing here is we thought the sexual intimacy part of this was going to be the highlight of it. What we realized is that was just the catalyst. That was the part that kept us together every day, but our emotional intimacy strengthened, our recreational intimacy strengthened, the romance strengthened, the love for one another strengthened. There was this time, I think, in our marriage at 11 years in that we were just doing life as individuals in this covenant relationship, in this, right? But it was in that moment in time where it was like, wait a minute, we're on the same team. How do we do this so that way we're constantly on the same team? And it was transformational for us. I'm not saying every couple needs to go through that or do that. But for us, it just brought a level of, I don't want to say dependency, but it brought this level of, connection with one another that we hadn't really experienced before, other than maybe when we were dating and maybe like in maybe that first year of marriage. And it just shifted our lives to the point of like, we never want to go back to where we were. And we're going to work as hard as we have to work to not go there. And that was one of the things too, is like, you really begin to realize how much intention and how much action you need to take to have that extraordinary marriage at times. I'm not saying you have to do it like that all the time, but there are times when you need to be intentional about it like no other, because if you don't, it's like driving down the road, Jason, with every single light going on in your dashboard on your car and thinking it's going to make it. Eventually it's going to break down. Like you're like, oh, it's going to go. No, oil's going to start spewing out. The radiator's going to go out. Transmission's going to go out. Things are blinking. And you just can't live your life like that. And you shouldn't be living your life like that. I think there's just so much more we have than just living life with a bunch of warning lights going off on our dashboard.
Yeah. And probably sometimes people, they don't even see those warning lights. They're not paying attention. Maybe they've lost even the interest for looking for that thing. Mm-hmm. But to your point, clearly, like anything that matters to you in life is going to require time, energy, and investment. Well, that's your car, your marriage. And so, all right, so let's get into these 6 pillars, right? So we've got emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, financial intimacy, spiritual intimacy, recreational intimacy and sexual intimacy. And I want to ask you about the guidelines you mentioned. So
yeah.
But anyway, let's start with the emotional. And if we can, I want to try to connect each of these back to a life of an entrepreneur or a lawyer trying to run a busy law firm. So in terms of emotional intimacy, how does that help couples communicate, process stress, address and repair conflict, and just try to create some emotionally happy or safe place at home?
Yeah. So emotional intimacy, your verbal, nonverbal communication. That's what it is. Right? We're talking. And most people think about it just as the verbal part, but I like to stress the nonverbal part. You slamming the door is communication. You turning your shoulder when your spouse says something to you, that's communication. And if we are able to understand that this is a skill, this is a learned skill, many of us, I think, would have let's talk it from like a type A personality, high achiever, we would have a lot more success in life if we realize that this is a skill that we can learn. The Tony you see today is not the same Tony that I was at year 11. 18 years of being willing to step in, over 900 episodes now of the One Extraordinary Marriage show, where Elisa and I get behind the microphones. It's just only her and I, and we have a 30-minute conversation every week. So we practice. We make it work. And so does it help at home? Absolutely. Does it help at work? Absolutely. Think about how you treat an employee. What would happen if your demeanor changes? The nonverbal side of you begins to change. You have self-realization that you're also causing your entire staff to get stressed out so the work doesn't get done. But because you're willing to self-evaluate and go, wow, like my nonverbal communication is really impacting my staff. Man, what joy could I bring into the office if I'm willing to make the shift and the change? But that's the big thing, Jason. You have to be willing to make that shift and that change, and you need to be intentional about it. And when you screw up, you need to be able to tell your spouse or even those in the office, like, I screwed up, but I'm going to do better tomorrow.
Yeah, it's such a great point, right? Because I think all of us, we need to have some level of self-awareness and reflection to really understand how we're contributing to all aspects of our life. And I think you bring up something that's important, right? Things aren't going well at home, and maybe your nonverbal or even verbal communication at home sucks. Now you're bringing that to work. People feel that, right? And you have a team, right? Especially if you're a leader, people look up to you. And when you're not really treating them well, or at a very minimum with respect, that's going to damage the performance and you know, the energy of the team. So yeah, there's something to that. All right. So now let's talk about the physical intimacy. And in this case, non-sexual touch and affection. How does that help maintain connection and prevent, you know, the roommate dynamic from setting in?
Yeah. So this you said it's key. Non-sexual. So this is just holding hands, hugs, kisses, cuddling. There's so many of us who desire that. And how do we make it so that way as a couple, we can have those times when all we're doing is holding hands, not expecting anything more. Now, could it lead to more? Absolutely. But what we realize with our audience, the one family, that's what we call our audience, many of them would say they want physical intimacy. And over the years, we would ask them, well, what does that mean to you? And so it began to open up this dialogue that there's a portion of society, when they say physical intimacy, they mean sex. But there's another side of that that's just like, no, I just want to walk in my front door after a long day and know that my spouse is there to give me a big old hug. And so both of those are important. And so we made sure to break this out and make sure people understand, like, hey, just that handhold, or just you're sitting on the couch and the hand on the knee could mean everything to your spouse. It just means you're there. You might be watching a TV show. Great. But you're not sitting on opposite ends of the couch. You're actually having that physical touch. And that touch we crave it since the time we're born. It's why they put babies right on their mama's chest soon as they're born, because that connection, that skin to skin connection is so vitally important.
Yeah, and it made me think of, I would imagine, all of these for what I'm about to say, but certainly the non-sexual touch. Like, so for people in relationships that feel like maybe they're not getting enough sex, but maybe they're just going right after the sex, maybe start with the physical non-sexual touch and affection. And I have a feeling You're the expert here, but I have a feeling that along with some of these other intimacy things are going to lead to that. Anyway, we're going to talk about sexual intimacy. That'll be the last of the six,
Yep.
but next up, we've got the financial intimacy. So, I've talked to, people that are family therapists and things like that, and they talk about how some of the biggest challenges couples face around children, and then the other one's money. And so how does financial intimacy help couples get aligned around the idea of money, obviously business risk when you're entrepreneurs, overall spending, investment, long-term goals around finances? What do they need to be thinking about there?
All of it. I mean, in different stages and seasons of life. And I'd say, hey, if you're an established business owner, cash flow, how's cash flow doing? Is it something that you even share with your spouse? Do they understand like what your W-2 is? Are you guys in a position where you've set up wills, trusts, long-term investments, life insurance policies, all of that stuff? And there's always this interesting dynamic, and every couple has to determine this for themselves. How much of the business do I share with my spouse in what we're doing and how we're doing? And some are okay. It's just like, hey, as long as your paycheck comes in every 2 weeks or whatever you get paid, I'm good to go. Others are like, it's a smaller office and you got 3 employees there now and we're struggling because you're paying everybody else, but we're getting the leftovers. So there is an interesting piece when it comes to financial intimacy as an entrepreneur. There's 2 sides of it. Like, how much of the business side are we talking about? And then what are we talking about from the family side? Because we're managing both of those, and I get it. Like, okay, revenue's down. Okay, well, I'm probably gonna have to let Elisa know that revenue's down, meaning we're still gonna get paid, but it's gonna be tight and we're gonna have to start moving some things around. Or we're flush and we're doing great. And it's like, oh, wow, we got some extra cash this month. What do we need to do? Do we need to stash it away? Do we need to pay down maybe if we got like car loans or the mortgage? Do we want to put it there? Like, do we want to put towards long-term investments? There's so much that we need to address. And I know it can feel daunting, but we got to start somewhere so that way we can address this pillar and not just let it float through the day. I think for most entrepreneurs, myself included, we have a tendency to be like, well, the business is over here. My spouse doesn't need to know about the business. I'm going to just make sure I'm moving money to the family and they're okay. Where in reality, the business, I think, is the bigger side we need to let them know about, because it can feel a little nebulous and we spend so much time and so much effort. And yet, why aren't we seeing the return on that?
Yeah, you can imagine how that could create a lot of stress, really, in both sides of that equation. One where you're struggling, there's some challenges financially, or on the other side where you're flush and what are you actually doing with that money? We'll talk a little bit more about the financial intimacy stuff, particularly for entrepreneurs. Next one I want to get into is the spiritual intimacy, right? The idea of shared values, purpose, religious values, whatever that looks like for a couple. But how does that help couples stay grounded, especially when life and business get stressful?
Yeah, I'm going to just say for myself, I'm a follower and have been a follower of Jesus for 26 years of my life now. It was 3 years after Elisa and I got married that we decided to become followers. And so it's taken a lot of learning on my own side of what does that do and what does the value bring? I guess in a value-based society, the way we look. I think for myself, it just gives me a calm, and Elisa and I a calm that, hey, everything can go to hell in a handbasket. We got each other and we have our Lord and Savior that we can rely upon. And everybody's faith journey is different. So I'm not here telling you what you have to have. But for Elisa and I, it brings us into places when we are good or when we are in difficult times that there's something beyond us. And so what does that look like in a home? It could be you're praying together. It means you're attending church together. Maybe you're doing a devotional together. It may be you're serving together for a cause that you believe in. At work, it could be those same things as well. You have a bigger purpose than just bringing in dollars. There's lives that are actually impacted by the work you do because you're willing to step out and go, I know you're having a tough morning or a tough day, but can I pray for you right now? And they could be a believer. They couldn't be. It's okay. Most people will not say no, but they always appreciate it when somebody is there and sees them and goes, you cared enough to pray for my mom who's dying? Thank you.
Yeah, that's really nice, right? Because I'm not a particularly religious person. My wife is more so, and every now and then she'll be, I have something coming up that's important, and later in the day she'll ask me how it went, and oh, it went great, and she's like, well, I did say a prayer for you, and so I love that because I'm like, I don't really do any praying, but I'm glad I got somebody doing occasional prayer for me and help give me a little better bounce on
Yeah.
whatever it is that I'm trying to work on.
I love that. And hey, and Jason, thank you for sharing that, because there are many couples that we come across that have different faith at this time in their lives. Some are like fully in, they're like, I'm going to church, and others are like, I'm cool, I'm good. One story that rocked me this year on our 6 Pillars at Sea marriage getaway, a couple that we've known for many years in the one family, been married 21 years. The third night on our cruise, we're at the dinner table, and he goes, I need to share something. And I'm like, all right, this never goes good. When somebody says that, I need to share something, you're like, ah, shoot, okay, here it goes. And he just like, since being on this trip, I just cannot deny the fact of Jesus Christ. And I was just like, and he had a wife, and he has a wife, I shouldn't say had, wonderful woman who's been praying for him for 21 years. And so to see this moment happen, I was just like, all right. And then the questions that came and everything. But here was a wife who was willing to just step in 2 different spiritual journey paths and just going, I'm going to just continue to pray for my husband. And so that is not uncommon in mine and Elisa's life. It's just that we both at a specific time in the summer of 2000 came to our own decision to go that journey.
Yeah. And that sounds great. I mean, in my case, like if you're not going to do the praying yourself, great to have somebody doing it for you.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about recreational intimacy, right? I think this is a big one too. And you mentioned serving, and obviously that could be in your religious community or it could be just in your regular community. But how do couples in general, or more broadly, keep having fun together, help them recover that energy in their life, and just make sure that whatever the business is, the law firm, is not consuming the entire relationship or being the core focus, but it brings it back to yourself. What kind of things do you recommend there?
Yep. This is a big one. Like recreational intimacy. This is the activities we do together. And as you said, Jason, the fun we have. We get married all on this, I think, euphoria that we're just going to have fun for the rest of our lives. And then life starts to hit us and we got to work and we got to do what we got to do, the normal day to day. And for many couples, the recreational intimacy begins to take a back seat. And so what I would say on this one, if you haven't, and I'm not saying you got to go out on some expensive date night or anything like this. This isn't date night. And I want to say that as well, because there came a point in our lives too. Everybody was like, just take your wife out on a date. Go on a date night. And I'm like, what do you mean? I got no money at this point in time in our lives. We got 2 young kids. And what does that look like? And so what I would share with many of you, some of the most simple things, the most least expensive things can be some of the most impactful activities and fun you have. What can you do? Buy a deck of Monopoly Deal. It's on Amazon. Go pick it up.
Monopoly?
It's called Monopoly Deal.
What is that? I feel like Monopoly, any time in my life I've ever played Monopoly, it ended up in a fight of some sort.
So Monopoly Deal is actually a card game that you can play like within like 10 to 15 minute rounds because of the way the game is played out. So it's not like Monopoly, the board game, where yes, there are many of fights and many of heated.
It takes 5 hours.
Yeah. No. You can just boom, 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 play it and have fun. You could do simple things like get the children to bed if you have children, even if you don't have children. Get a blanket, put it on your living room floor, turn on some music, and put on some candles. And maybe you pick up something fun to talk about. You pick up like, what is this right here? Yeah. Elisa had this right here on her desk. Conversation starters for families. We have our book right there. Connect like you did when you first met. Maybe it's just a question you guys ask one another. Maybe for some of you, it is just going out to go play mini golf or something. Maybe it's to go for a hike with one another. Maybe it is a big to-do night and you're going to get dressed up and really want to feel good about each other and want to go to a nice restaurant, but I would also make sure that you add something in there that it's just not a meal and a movie. Like find some other things to go do. Go axe throwing, get dressed up and then go axe throwing in your dress ups. Like it's okay. Like go laugh with one another again. Go sit in the pool. Like so many people think like it has to be this monumental thing to go have fun. I mean, sometimes Elisa and I here in our community in Florida, especially in the winter months when it is so beautiful, it's like, let's just go hang out at our community pool, sit next to one another, read our books, hold some hands. People think like, oh, that's just everyday life. It is, but we're intentional and we take time to go just spend time together. And that's important.
Yeah. I mean, even go for a nice walk somewhere in your neighborhood or
absolutely
on a nice evening. Just do something maybe you're saying that you don't maybe normally do in the course of your day-to-day life, but just plan something. All right. So let's talk about sexual intimacy. And for everybody here, we're talking about the 6 Pillars of Intimacy, the book written by Tony DiLorenzo and Tony here. Here's the book. We all see it right here. Thank you for sending this to me, by the way. Also,
absolutely.
I don't know if you do this for everyone, but you included some lube in there as well, which we haven't tried out yet, Uber Lube, but thank
really
you for
good.
that. So I want to talk now in terms of the sexual intimacy. Well, I do want to go back. You mentioned when you did your 60-day challenge, you guys had some guidelines in place. I want to get to that. But first, let's talk generally. How does that affect just the overconfidence in the relationship, your desire for one another, the feeling of closeness, and just having the marriage feel alive still like it did early?
Yeah. This is a big one, right? I think you talked about expectations and unmet expectations, Jason. I think this one is one of those we walk into our marriage and at different times and seasons of our marriage where there are certain expectations we have that we don't share with our spouse that then become unmet expectations that then create a lot of cracks, not only in the sexual intimacy pillar, but into the other ones as well, because we feel rejected, we feel neglected, we feel like we're not having this intimate. And let me just say this too, intimacy, the definition of intimacy is closeness and connection. That's the true meaning of intimacy. It's closeness and connection. That's what it is. And so we don't get to have that with the one person that we said I do to. And so it can create a lot. And it has created a lot in my own marriage, for many, many other marriages. I mean, I think that's one of the things for Elisa and I with the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. We really hone in on all these pillars of intimacy, and we're open, honest, and transparent. But especially around the sexual intimacy pillar, we've been very clear, like, we're not going to just give you the, oh, it's always good and we're just the best. We talk about the tough times, aging, kids around. I mean, I'm 52 and Elisa's 51 and my 23 and my 20-year-old still live with us. So what does that look like to be able to be sexually intimate in a time when we thought we weren't going to have children in our lives? At least here, not in our lives, but not here in our home. And so how does that change the dynamic? And so this is one where I think when we begin to even face an aging body, both male and female, if we don't address it, if we don't talk about it, it can cause a lot of frustration for us at home and even at work, because now we're being neglected. We start looking other places. It starts distracting us. I'm not naive to think that there isn't pornography or other places. I mean, OnlyFans or whatever that, let me say, I mean, I forget what it was, but I think it was somewhere in the vicinity, and don't quote me exactly, but I think it was something like somebody who's looking at porn in some way, shape, or form, be it online, OnlyFans, wherever, movies, this, and is something on the average of like 3 hours a day.
People are spending 3 hours a day looking at porn?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So when you think about that, though, and we think about from how are we being successful at work,
that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time that we're wasting away. And somebody's like, oh, well, I get it, man. I had a pornography addiction. I broke that 22 years ago. You know, and I literally gave myself hours a day back. And this is back in the day when we had dial-up, so it was really slow. You just even think about that. My goodness, if we're able to have that sexual and intimate relationship, that closeness and connection with our spouse, and we can get rid of all this side stuff, and in our head and in our body, how much time we could have just on our business. Like, people don't think like that, though. They're just like, oh, but it's okay. It's like, all right, well, start timing yourself, because I know many coaches who have told me, like, take a time audit and we'll see where you're leaving money on the table. And if you're putting 3 hours into something like that, you're leaving a lot of money on the table.
Or it's just like the broader thing, right? I mean, even just as a guy, forget the porn aspect of it. You're just spending a lot of time thinking about sex. Obviously, if you're not getting it, you're going to be thinking and desiring it. And that's just sucking up some amount of your energy. So it's nice when you can have that being taken care of. And we all think, especially when we get married, all right, good, I'm good to go now. I have this all taken care of. A wife or a husband, we're set on that front. But the reality is things change over time. But I wanted to ask you about your experience and to talk a little more about your 60-day challenge. And you mentioned the word guidelines around how that would work. If you don't mind sharing what exactly we're talking about here.
So when Elisa and I set that up, it was just one of those things of like, okay, is this carte blanche? Like, what does it look like? Again, setting up expectations so we know we're on the same page and we can be successful. And so basically the way we set this up was like, hey, if either one of us is traveling, obviously we're not having sex. If either one of us is sick, like ill, we're not going to have sex. And I ended up getting like a viral migraine. Never had one before, never had one since. But during this 60-day sex challenge, I had a viral migraine. It was painful, ended up in urgent care. And then 3 was if she was on her period, we would put that aside during her heaviest time right there. And so those were the guidelines we used for ourselves to just go, okay, if we want this to be a success for us, how do we set up our own expectations so we don't feel like, oh, well, that's not happening? Well, I'm sick. As much as I would love to, my head is pounding right now. So we understand, Elisa, it's 2 months. So there's going to be 2 cycles that she's going to go through. So I shouldn't be all huffy and puffy knowing that that's what's happening this week of the month or we're traveling.
And what about, so in those guidelines, so a couple of scenarios where it's like, okay, we're going to be able to take a pass on this particular day. But what are some examples of things that wouldn't be acceptable? Like I'm thinking of if I came home and I'm like, I had a bad day today. I don't want to do this. It would seem to me that that's not acceptable. If you're committed to this thing, you've got to, and this is kind of the whole point, is to make a point of doing it when you don't necessarily feel like it. And then you build that level of intimacy that you didn't have.
Yep. And so sexual intimacy, we define sexual intimacy, romance, initiating, foreplay, and sexual intercourse. So in your situation where you're saying, well, I've had a long day. It's like, okay, well then how are we romancing one another? How am I initiating? How are you initiating? How are we having some foreplay? Sexual intimacy isn't just the act of intercourse, which is what a lot of us think about. It's just like the act of penis into vagina. That's it. Boom. We had sex. Move on. And yet it's so much more dynamic. And so when we look at it from a place of, well, how do I romance you then? Does it mean like you're going to just go take a little bath right now? You're going to just you're going to hang out in the shower. Maybe my way of initiating while you're in the shower is I come out of the closet naked or whatever that may be. Then it's like we're engaging one another. And yet I will say we have met many couples in the one family do their own sex challenges. Many have surpassed us. I think the longest that I can recall is 287 days in a year. So by far blew Elisa and I out of the water. And if you would talk to most of them, they were just intentional about looking at how are we romancing? How are we initiating? What does foreplay look like? Which then leads to that act of sexual intercourse.
Yeah, so that's a good point that I wanted to ask about in the sense of like the engagement and the romance. It's not just like, all right, let's just go knock this out and then in and out, be done with it. It's that actually
becomes too routine. It becomes boring.
Yeah, then it's not doing the thing that you're hoping that it's going to do. It's to really engage and to feel, which it sounds like that is difficult. And so the follow up to that is, how do you obviously you schedule this? Like, where do you find the time to make it happen? And I guess for every couple, how much time they need may vary, but that seems to be the first challenge. When is this going to go down every day, particularly when you have kids at home, regardless of the age or anybody in the.
Yeah, that is part of it. But I think what we need to do is look at our marriage as a priority. It's one of the top things in that. Where am I successful? And so you're going to find time. You'll find time. You got an office. You got a boardroom with the door and a lock on it, and everybody leaves for lunch. Okay, I've heard it. I got friends who are attorneys. I've heard these things going on in their own office. So yes, time is of the essence. It's willing to go, how do we make that happen? Elisa and I found to make it a game, and we've done anywhere from, so that was 18 years ago. So I think we've done 17 other sex challenges since then, anywhere from 7 to 30 days. And so we've learned a lot over the times. And some of them, honestly, Jason, have been those like just quick, boring, but it taught us something. We're like, what was going on in our lives? That's where we got, and we need to change something up. And so by the third or fourth day, we're like, what are we doing here? What are we missing? And so we got to just take a step back and go, we're not romancing one another. There really isn't much foreplay going on. It's just like quickies and let's move on because we got other things to think about. And so it makes us stop and go, no, we do need to look at our calendar a little bit more intentionally and go, no, we have an hour here. We have a couple of hours here that we can just sit, relax with one another, have fun, and enjoy the time. Like, again, recreational intimacy. Have some fun with one another in some way, shape, or form that then could lead into the sexual intimacy because they all intertwine in some way, shape, or form. All these pillars don't just sit on their own by themselves. They do intertwine with one another.
Yeah, what an interesting way to look at all of it. And I want to ask you about, so once people just generally understand all these pillars, I think the next question is how to actually protect the relationship, particularly when life and businesses are at their most demanding. And what type of practical systems, routines can you recommend that help couples stay connected and keep the relationship alive during these times when, life and business is particularly difficult or demanding?
Yeah. So let's run down it real quick. Emotional intimacy, find 30 minutes a week. Have a conversation, 30 minutes a week. That's Elisa and I. That's what we've done the most through our One Extraordinary Marriage show. We have a 30-minute conversation every week. Do we have others? Yeah, that one just happens to be recorded, but it's probably one of the best things we have done in our marriage over the last 16 years.
And in that case, you're just talking about your podcast. So it's not just like, hey, we're doing a podcast for business reasons. This is really for us as a relationship.
As much as it is for everybody else in the one family, it's for us too, because these are topics that are near and dear to our own lives or maybe friends or other people in the one family. And we just begin to have a conversation. And so if you're like, well, what do we talk about? Over 900 episodes, go find one, listen to it together, and then have a 30-minute conversation. Physical intimacy. What is it that you two enjoy? And just take time. Now, this could be 5 minutes. It could be less of just making sure once a week again, that you're being intentional around it. If it means that you walk into the door and you give your spouse a hug because he or she really needs that when you come back after a long day, then just go give them a hug. Financial intimacy, I would say that's on a monthly basis. Like let's get into the numbers at least once a month. It doesn't need to be daily. Maybe it does for some people or weekly. But I think as long as we're in a good spot and we're talking about it monthly, I think we're good. The bigger stuff is what? Probably quarterly, semi-annually. Obviously, taxes are yearly. That's there. A spiritual intimacy, what does that look like on a weekly basis? Again, it could be a daily basis of prayer or maybe reading the Bible together or something of that nature. Are you attending church? Are you serving? Recreational intimacy, I would say at minimum, at least one outing, date, one activity that you're doing at least each month. And if you can increase that, like you both like golf, you both like pickleball, you both like kayaking, then find those moments where you can honestly do that. And for those of you who do that, kudos to you, because there are fewer of us who have something regular that we do in this than those that don't. I mean, there's just so many couples who don't have anything that they enjoy doing together. And then on the sexual intimacy side, what we call our intimacy lifestyle, and that is we schedule sex. And not in the way that you're thinking or others may be thinking. We do not put it on the calendar at Tuesday at 5 p.m. But Elisa and I know, and we've been running this for 16 years now, that each week we know we are going to be sexually intimate twice a week. One time a week I initiate, one time a week she initiates. And we just have run that over and over and over again for 16 years.
Yeah, so that seems like a good approach. So it's not like, all right, 3 p.m., I'll see you on the conference room table.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah, like
on the calendar.
That's not the way we're scheduling it. There's a lot more. We have numerous episodes around that. In each and every one of these, we have numerous episodes where we go deep into how do you do this? What does this look like for your marriage? What are the questions you should be asking one another? How do I get intentional? How do we take action? And our goal is, honestly, through the 6 pillars of intimacy, you find the cracks, you learn how to strengthen them, and then they get strong, and you continue to do that. Like that is life. But if we just don't do anything, Jason, the pillars are going to eventually just crack. They're not taken care of. And we've all seen ancient ruins, right? Like they're not touching these things and the pillars are cracking. Now there are some where they're like, whoa. If we don't retrofit these, the entire building's going to crash. And we don't want that because it's a historic monument. It's the same thing in our marriage. If we want to have extraordinary marriages, then we need to pay attention to these pillars and strengthen them.
So in terms of bringing this kind of all together as we can start to wrap up here, near the end of your book, you talk about a fork in the road. Now people can either learn the framework and think about some of the things we've talked about here today, or they can just do what they've always done. And that's kind of what a lot of people end up choosing. But if they do decide to take action, for a lawyer, an entrepreneur listening who knows some things at home are not quite where they should be, what would you say is just the first thing they should do this week to get started?
Man, if I can say, I'd love them to take our 6 pillars of intimacy quiz. Honestly, I think it's the one thing right now, if you just walk away and you're like, man, Tony, this sounds like something we need to step into, or even I need to right now. One of the things we bring up in the book a lot is, what can I do? Sometimes your spouse isn't ready, but you can step in and go, what can I do? We have our 6 pillars of intimacy quiz. And when you go through it, it's going to tell you what is your strongest pillar, because I and Elisa both like to go, where are you strong? And then you can determine where you have cracks, take the strength that you have from one pillar, put it to another. And so I would tell somebody, go to oneextraordinarymarriage.com/quiz, take the quiz. It's quick, it's easy, but it's going to give you an idea of where you are right now in your marriage, where you're strong, and then where can we strengthen it.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty cool tool. I feel like I want to go and try it out. I spent a lot of time researching and getting ready for the show, but I'm not taking the quiz. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. But I'm here with Tony DiLorenzo. He's the author with his wife of the 6 pillars of intimacy that we've been talking about. He's also the host of one of the top marriage podcasts, One Extraordinary Marriage. And we've been talking about how your relationship at home can either multiply your performance as an entrepreneur or business owner, or quietly work against it. So you can find Tony at oneextraordinarymarriage.com. There's a ton of free resources on there. And what other stuff can people find on there, Tony? I know you had a whole resource section, videos, and, quick things you can download.
Yeah, you'll find everything there, from articles that we talked about here on every single pillar. Obviously, the podcast, we have numerous resources, both free and paid, depending on where you'd like to go. We have marriage coaching with Elisa. If that's something where you're like, man, I'm just stuck, and what do we do? Elisa has worked with many successful entrepreneurs, state senators, representatives, CEOs, to just normal people that are just working, doing their thing, loving life, and yet they've realized that there's something in their marriage where they cannot figure out how to put the exact tool in their marriage toolbox to strengthen a particular pillar. So there's all sorts of good stuff there. And by all means, make sure you jump on, take that quiz, because that will give you at least the guideline and the starting point of like, this is where I am and this is what we can do.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like whatever it is that we're trying to improve at, we all need some tools to help us. And it sounds like you can find a lot of that stuff on your site. So you can also connect with Tony and One Extraordinary Marriage, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest. I'm going to include links to all this stuff in the show notes. Big question though, is Pinterest still a thing? You guys use that?
Is it still a thing? That's a good question. I'd have to ask my content director. I know she tells me that it's good and it's worth it. So I'm just like, sure. There is a hefty amount of people and traffic on Pinterest. Do I personally use it? No. But A lot of our articles have found a lot of favor over at Pinterest that then introduces us to a lot of great folks. But I think it's more of the content that we share. I think it just needs, and even ours is, I think, still like on the fringe of stuff. I think if we were more like home goods and party stuff, I think we'd be better, but we definitely still post there.
Good to know. I'm going to have to check it out. I didn't even know anybody was even using Pinterest anymore until I saw it in the notes here. But so anyway, you take that 6 Pillars of Intimacy quiz. You can find that oneextraordinarymarriage.com/quiz. And you, again, figure out what the strongest pillars are. Use those skills to improve other pillars that have cracks. So again, you can find Tony's podcast, One Extraordinary Marriage, the book, 6 Pillars of Intimacy. I think you can find that on Amazon. I'm sure you can get it on the website. Tony, anything else to add to our conversation here today before we close it out?
Thank you very much. And to each and every one of you who listened, I appreciate it. It means a ton to me knowing that we can impact your marriage wherever you may be. I just appreciate you taking time to listen, and hopefully it was encouraging and brought some hope to your life.
Yeah, well, encouraging for me. I enjoyed this conversation for sure. So, Tony, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining me here today. That's Tony DiLorenzo, everybody. And that's going to be it for today. Some great new shows coming up. So please stay tuned and check out what we're up to here. And we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Till next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life.